All right. Title of this is called You Give Them Something to Eat. You give them something to eat. Mark chapter 6, verse 34 through 44. The Bible says, the multitudes saw them, that's Jesus and his disciples, departing, and many knew him and ran there on foot from all the cities. They arrived, that is the multitude, before the disciples and Jesus, and they came together to him. And Jesus, when he came out, saw a great multitude and was moved with compassion for them because they were like sheep not having a shepherd. So he began to teach them many things. And when the day was now far spent, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and already the hour is late. Send them away that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat." But he answered and said to them, "You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "Shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them something to eat?" But he said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then he commanded them to make them all sit down in groups on the green grass. And so they sat down in ranks, in hundreds and in fifties. And when he had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, blessed and broke the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And the 2 fish he divided among them all. So they all ate and were filled, and they took up 12 baskets full of fragments and of the fish. Now those who had eaten the loaves were about 5,000 men. All right, so let's look at this a little bit more in depthly. Jesus' disciples came to him and made Jesus aware of a situation that was going on. And in fact, what they were doing was making him aware of a need. The multitude needed to eat, and so, being the wise and discerning disciples that they obviously were, they offered Jesus a way to meet the need. Send the people away. Just let that sink in. That's a power pause. I'll just let that sink in right there. All right. As we stated before, we actually talked about this last week. Prayer is the way we communicate with God in our walk with him through the pitfalls of life. Matthew 6, 9 through 11 doesn't say, if you pray. It says, when you pray, pray this way. And obviously we've been through that prayer many times. We're taught to ask God in that prayer to meet the needs of the day, because it says, give us this day our daily bread. Not just ours, but in the lives of those around us, as we learned last week, the people that we're in contact with on a daily basis. We're taught to make our requests to the Lord and invite him into our daily lives. James 4 and 2 says, you do not have because you do not ask. Matthew 7:7 says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door shall be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be open. Now I want you to know I could preach a long time on this, but it just seems to be a lot of Christians get into the mode that God knows what I need, and if it was God's will, it would just happen, and yet God is telling us what his will is. His will is that we ask, right? And it's not really our job to determine how he's going to do what he's going to do, but it is our job to ask. Why did God require us to ask? It's not that he doesn't know, but in the asking, we're having to continue a relationship with a heavenly Father that if we're not careful, like I was talking about before, we get so busy doing the affairs and the routines of life that we forget that life is not just about getting stuff done. It's really primarily about having a relationship with God and walking out this life in relationship with him. And prayer keeps us in contact and in communion with him. Many times if we didn't have needs or we weren't going through stuff and we didn't have an opportunity or we didn't have a God that has taught us to be able to come to him in prayer, we might never have contact or communion with him. And you say, Pastor, well, that's pretty far-fetched. I don't believe that to be the case. I don't believe that it's far-fetched that we get so busy with life. I think many of us here could probably look back on stretches of our life where we got so busy we never really, if we look back on our life and did an examination, we never really had a communion with God. It's not because anything wasn't going bad, it's because everything was going good. And we just got busy. We got caught up in the affairs of life. But God teaches us the importance of prayer and the importance of asking. And the primary way behind that. I think the primary reason for that is that we might continue to have a relationship and communion with Him. Yet, even when we do come to Him and ask, how often do we as disciples ask God to intervene, but like the disciples, out of the vast resources of our knowledge and experience, offer God our expert advice on how to best deal with the problem? Right? That counselor doesn't know anything. I need to tell that counselor what to do. I've had more life experience than that counselor. Now you say, okay, well, that's a counselor, and the reality is that may be true to some extent, but not with God, right? To be honest with you, it's often what we are asked to do in daily life. In the business world, some of y'all work in the business world. For many people, many of your bosses and your managers will tell me, that's okay, I want you to make me aware of a situation, but don't come to me with an awareness of something going on without bringing to me at least one or two or three different solutions to the problem. Right? We're taught that. That's the way that things work in the natural realm. We're often instructed to do that in the business world, but we're not in the business world. We're in a kingdom. We're not supposed to do things the way the world does them. We're to transform the world with the way the kingdom does things. Right? We're not supposed to do the best that we can do. We're not supposed to do the best that we can figure out to do. We're supposed to advise and be in communion with God of the needs that are going on and be open to God's impartation of knowledge, impartation of power to do things the way He wants to do things. And I'll tell you right now, if you think God does things the way we do things, you're sorely misconstruing the way that God's nature and revelation have taken place throughout the Bible, because you can't even begin from the beginning of time. Who says, let there be light, and there's light? Right? Doesn't work that way. Who comes and looks for a person that's 99 years old and says, by this time next year, you and your wife, who happens to be 89, are going to have a child? Who does that? We wouldn't do that. We'd be looking, okay, let's see who are the young married couples, and let's try to find out, we'd do stuff like that because we're thinking on a natural human level. What God would tell Moses to say, hey, the Israelites, they're complaining because they have no water. Okay, take your staff, and you see that big rock over there? I want you to go stand in front of the people, and I want you to hit that rock with your staff, and when you do that, water's going to come out and going to give 2 million plus people and their cattle and their herds all the water that they need. How many of y'all would go up to your boss and say, I got a plan? Yeah, what's your plan? Well, first we got to go buy a staff, okay? We got to go buy a staff, and then we got to find a big rock somewhere, and when we find this big rock, how many of y'all would have your job tomorrow? Right? Or think about Joshua and the Battle of Jericho. And Joshua's a military commander. He knows military tactics. He knows how to fight warfare. He knows how to do that. And so when the first city they went into was going to be Jericho, I'm sure he got together with all his other commanders, and they came up with a military plan on how to best deal with this city. And if it was up to me, I'd say go around it, but that's not the option. You got to take Jericho. But what happens is all of a sudden what happens is that God comes down, and the Bible says He shows up, as basically as the captain of the Lord of hosts. And when Joshua sees Him, he falls on his face. And first thing he said was, are you with us? Or are you with them? And he said, I'm not with any of you guys. I'm with God. The question is not whose side I'm on. The question, whose side are you on? But if you go and you read that, he continues to say, this is what I want you to do. I want you to get all the people of Israel, and I want you to put horns, trumpets, or we call them shofars. I want you to get them. I want you to put them out in front, and I want you to walk around the city once every day. Nobody say anything, but just kind of blow the horns. Do that 6 times. On the 7th time, I want you to go around 7 times, and on the 7th time, I want everybody to shout. And when they shout, those walls, which, by the way, were wide enough for 2 chariots to be able to go across at the same time. So these are not little dinky old walls about the size of this pew. No, they're about the size of from here to where Paul is back there in thickness. And I don't know how high they were, but God says the minute you shout, those walls are going to come down. Now, how many of y'all would love to be able to go to your CEO and say, I got a plan? What is your plan? Well, we got to get some shofars. I don't know. I've been to Shofar R Us online. We can get some for this much money. Hannah Joe says it's work shofar. Okay. Right? That's how we think. God doesn't think like we think. He thinks a little bit differently. Right? How about Jehoshaphat? Anybody remember Jehoshaphat? All this army is coming up against him, and to be honest with you, he's a little nervous about it, a little worried about it, because this is a great army, and he doesn't have that many people in his military, because it's not longer two kingdoms, it's one kingdom. He's the king of the southern kingdom of Judah, and these are the military powers of the day, and all of a sudden they're coming against him, not just one, but two or three different armies, and so he gathers everybody together, and that's a great time to have a prayer meeting when there's a problem, right? We need to get everybody together. Why? Because we got a problem. We need to seek God. I'm going to tell you something. That's what you need to do when you're in the middle of a problem. That's what prayer is for. It's not just for that, but it is for that as well. To get the mind of God. And so he got in the mind of God. They got together as a body. And what happened when they got together as a people of God? Then all of a sudden the Spirit of God fell upon one of the people in the congregation, and they began to prophesy. And as they began to prophesy, he began to say, see all this multitude? God, you don't even have to lift a finger. God's going to take care of all of this. And so, Jehoshaphat said, trust in the Lord and his prophets. And they were going to do that. In fact, they all got together and they all decided that they were going to trust God to do what he said. But they were going to trust him in an even greater way. And say, okay, well, he said we don't have to worry about it, so let's go get the choir and let's put them in front. And let the choir go out in front. And to be honest with you, some of the politically, people that were politically astute probably thought that's a good idea, because at least if they're in front, I don't have to be in front. But the reality is what they were doing is they were trusting in God. And what happened? God began to move. Maybe the thunder began to, and all of a sudden what happened is the people began to fight each other. How many of y'all would love to be able to present that solution to your boss, or to your principal, or to your the place where you're employed at? God doesn't think like we think. We're not supposed to do things the way the world does them. We're to transform the way the world does things with the ways of the kingdom. It's amazing how often the solutions we do offer so often require the least of us as possible. Thankfully, God does not think the way that we think. You say, well, what do you mean by that? Well, what did the disciples say? Hey, let's send them away. What does that require of them? Very little, right? Thankfully, God's thoughts are not our thoughts, and his ways are not our ways. In fact, his solution for the lostness of man required not the least of him, but all of him. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believeth on him should not perish, but have everlasting life. The Son came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. His solutions often will involve us to a greater degree than we would often like. I said, well, Pastor, you're supposed to encourage us to get involved, not discourage us. If you're saying it's going to cost us something to get involved with the things of God, I'm not sure I want to do that. Well, the reality is, you might be tempted to think that if God's going to require that I be a part of his solution, I won't bring these needs to his attention. If you do decide to take that approach, you will also be denied the privilege of seeing the power of God move, and the privilege of witnessing the glory of God manifest in your midst, and most importantly, manifest in you. And as it manifests in you, the glory of God impacting your children and your children's children. I think one of the reasons that we've lost our children and continue to lose our children and our children's children is because we've become passive. We become just kind of complacent with the things of God. We're no longer like Isaiah saying, here am I, send me. We're like, God, I know someone that can go for you. Let me talk to him. What was the slogan of a couple of years ago? Been there, done that, bought that T-shirt, send somebody else. Well, that's true. And you know what happens if Esther doesn't stand up? God does say, I'll find somebody else. But the reality is, what's the impact of going to be upon Esther and upon her children and upon her children's children? Right? You say, well, I'm still faithful. I'm going to church, but are you on fire? Are you experiencing the glory of God in your life? Is your family going to experience the glory of God in your life if all you're trying to do is just do just enough to get yourself into heaven? God wants more than that for your life. God wants you to be a burning wick. He wants you to be on fire for the things of God. And in order for that to happen, it's going to require more of you than just a passive sitting in the pews on Sunday morning and putting in a little bit in the offering. Every time the offering plate comes by and somebody's actually looking. It's going to require more than that. It's going to require someone that's coming before the Lord and says, God, there's a need here, and I want to bring this to your attention. And by the way, God, if for some reason you decide that you want to use me, here am I, send me. Well, that does require more of us. It does require that we get involved. But if you get involved and God begins to do stuff in your life, how many of y'all would like to be able to come home? I can imagine Moses coming home and talking to his family and saying, well, what happened when you went after God? What happened when God called you? Tell me what took place in Egypt. Well, let me tell you, I can't tell you about all the stuff that happened there. It just takes too long. And I'm going to try to make a long story shorter, but I can tell you that once we did come out, all of a sudden there was a cloud that was leading us by day, and there was a fire in front of us by night. And it was the most awesome thing because this cloud, everywhere we went, this cloud would provide a shade in our lives. And so we just decided, you know what, we're going in the desert. We need to stay under this cloud. And it began to dawn on me that this wasn't a natural cloud, but this was actually the presence of God, because this cloud, all of a sudden, it became a fire at night. And so we followed this cloud, and this cloud led us into a place where we were hemmed in on the left and we were hemmed in on the right. There was a sea in front of us, and we thought, well, we'll just go back the way we came in. Only the cloud, it just continued to stay where it was. And we turned around, and all of a sudden there was the Egyptian army that had let us go. And they decided this wasn't such a good idea after all. And I can imagine Moses, and I just want to tell you something, Gershom, and I want to tell you something. He was talking to his kids. I want to tell you what happened. I've seen God do some things before, but, I was in a pickle right now because, here we are. We're about to get wiped out. And we were trusting in God, and I just didn't know what to do. And I came before the Lord, and while I was talking to God about it, God says, stop talking, Moses, and just get out there in front and take that staff you got and start lifting it up. And I said, okay, God, I guess I got nothing else to lose. If I try to do something else, I got no choice. So I get out in front of the people, I lift up my staff, and while I'm lifting up my staff, all of a sudden the wind begins to blow. I can imagine telling him his sons going, really, Dad? Really? I can imagine telling his grandkids somewhere down the road, and the wind of God began to blow. And I want to tell you what I saw, a child. I want to tell you what I saw, a grandson. I want to tell you what your grandfather saw. As I lifted up my staff, all of a sudden the wind began to blow. And where there seemed to be no way, all of a sudden there seemed to be a channel blowing through the middle of that sea. And that channel began to blow, and it began to blow. And all of a sudden I saw the waters begin to part. And not only did the waters begin to part, you think, okay, man, I'm about to get all muddy. I'm glad I bought that warranty for my boots, But that's not what happened. God continued to blow until when he was ready, he said, okay, now I want you to go. We stepped out into that sea, and there was not one wet place in that sea. We walked and passed through the sea on dry ground, just like I'm walking through this thing. 2.5 million people walk through an ocean. I saw that with my own eyes, child. Can you imagine the little kids saying, Papa, will you tell us that again? Will you tell us what God did through you and how God did through your life? How many of us, we need those interactions and communions with God that we can pass on to our children, where it's not just something that I'm doing because I get a salary, because I'm a pastor of a church, or because I'm doing my duty because this is what Christians are required to do. No, because I have a relationship with God, and I want to tell you what God has done when I laid hands on someone and all of a sudden that person was dead and they came alive. I want to tell you something. I didn't just hear about it. Somebody didn't just tell me. I felt the power of God in my hands. I saw a person that was dead come alive. And Papa, can you tell me about this other one? Can you tell me about this? That's what we need to get back to, church. Well, how does that happen? It doesn't happen by trying to send them home. It doesn't happen by trying not to be involved. It doesn't happen by just doing the least that I can do. It happens when we come before the Lord and say, God, there's something going on here. And God says, well, I'm glad you brought that up. I've been wanting to do something in that situation. Are you interested? Ha, 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 ha. You hear what I'm saying? Everybody's in that place. Everybody's in that position, because the bottom line is we'll never be able to do it on their own. While it is a privilege to invite God into our lives through the medium of prayer, it's not our job to determine how he's going to accomplish the task that he's inviting us or we're inviting him into. We have to let God be who he is, God. He's perfectly capable of dealing with any situation, and he has the resources and the power that are infinitely beyond our capacity of even to conceive of. Like Peter in the Bible, who when it was made aware to Jesus that he was going to have to pay a temple tax because Peter had that problem. He had the gift of gab, and not only did it cause some good things to happen, but it caused a lot of bad things to happen. They came and asked him about whether Jesus paid the temple tax, and Peter said, sure, we pay the temple. Never thought about it. He just said, yeah. He came to Jesus, and Jesus started correcting him about his view. But since you got yourself in the position, let me tell you what to do. So there was a need. The tax had to be paid. How many of us would go to prayer if there was a need? We're talking to Jesus and we say, God, here's how I need you to meet this need. I need you to send me a check for this much amount of money. Oh, and by the way, you can make it for a little bit more because I want to do something else too. Or, I want to tell you, you think this isn't true. God, here's what you need to do. See, this guy in our church, he's got money. So when I share with him my problem and my need, just put it on his heart, to give me that money. We got it all figured out. And if God would just listen to us, we'd make his life a whole lot easier. But that's not what happened. Peter went and let Jesus know, and Jesus said, okay, Peter, this is how we're going to deal with it. I want you to get your fishing pole. Do what? Go get your fishing pole. I want you to go to the lake, and I want you to drop your line in, and you're not going to just need one. All you're going to need is one hook and one bait. That's it. Nobody goes fishing with one hook and one bait. Usually when I go fishing, we go down to the bait shop, and we get like a pound of live shrimp, and we get maybe a couple of pounds of dead shrimp, and then we got a net, and we're going to catch mullet while we're out there. We got to get a lot of bait because we plan on catching some fish. Jesus said, nope, just go first put your line in. The first fish that catches on that hook, you pull them up. And when you pull up that fish, there's going to be a coin in that fish's mouth. You take that coin and you go pay your debt and mine as well. Now, how many of us would have figured that out? The only way that Peter was going to experience the resources of God was not by telling God what to do, but by hearing what God had already made provision for. His desire for us is the same as what he expressed toward his disciples when they made him aware of the need. He said to them, you give them something to eat. I want you to know that this is not a suggestion. It is a command. Listen to what I'm saying. It's not a suggestion. It is a command. Jesus was telling them his purpose, not just for feeding the multitude, but his purpose for their lives, and also his purpose for our lives, because we too are disciples. And really the translation for this that will best meet what I want to talk about here this morning is this. You give them something to eat should be and can be translated this way. My will is to work through you to meet the needs at hand. My will is to work through you to meet the needs of the task at hand. Turn to somebody and say, I think he's talking to you. Now, I want you to notice that the interaction that takes place when Jesus makes the disciples aware of his desire to work through them. They immediately began to formulate a plan based on what they know and what they have on hand. They used their reasoning and resources to try and accomplish this God-given task. How do I go about it? I don't know. Let's see what we got. Let's go look in the pantry. See how much fish we got. See how many loaves we got. Okay, we don't have enough. How much money we got? I don't know. Let's go see how much money we got in the treasury. Where's Judas? Oh, he's gone again. So, what are we trying to do? We're trying to really determine whether we can accomplish what God is wanting to accomplish by how much money and how much resources we have. Right? That's how we do. We're people. That's naturally what we do. All right? But we need to grasp the understanding that God is not limited to what we have on hand or what we're capable of doing. God is a supernatural God who has access to unlimited power, unlimited resources, and is capable of meeting every need. What we need, therefore, is not better plans or better funding or whatever the case may be. No, what we need is a revelation of what God wants to do, and then we need faith. Faith is the currency of the kingdom. Faith is what unlocks the resources of heaven into our lives to accomplish that which God wants to do. It's faith. It's not money. If it was money, then all the rich people in the world would be in the best position. But Jesus actually said, it's the poor in spirit. Blessed are you, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. Why? James tells us why. Because the poor are rich in faith. Now, I want to tell you something. Faith is not determined by the size of your bank account. It's not. You can be wealthy and have faith. You can be poor and not have faith. But what we're trying to do is make a distinction, is that what God values and what God honors is not money or lack of money. What he honors is faith. Faith is the currency of the kingdom. So we need to be able to know what it is that God wants to do. We have to have a revelation of God's will. And that's what he's revealing here to Peter and the disciples. You go feed them. This is a revelation of his will. And then we need to have faith. That is, we need to put our trust not in our ability to accomplish his will, but in God's ability to accomplish his will. But listen, there's more to it than that. We can believe God to accomplish his will in somebody else. It's much harder for us to believe that God will accomplish his will through you and me. We have to trust and believe that when God reveals his will, he has got the power and the ability to accomplish his will in and through you and I. Am I making sense? All right. There are two extremes that we often lean towards as Christians. All of me and none of God. I got to do this. I got to make it happen. I got to get it done. This is what I feel like I'm supposed to do. God showed me. So, and this is what I call the Jacob nature. This is Jacob going to work to bring about the plans of God. And I want you to know, you may not know it, but my middle name is Hyman. You say, well, what is Hyman? Hyman is a derivative of the name Jacob. Jacob, and it pains me to tell you this, but Jacob was my nature. God told me this is what I got to do. How am I going to get it done? This is what are you going to do in my life? How am I going to accomplish it? What have I got to do to get it to happen? What have I got to do to make it come to pass? That was Rick. And how many of us fall into the same trap? Jacob means heel grabber. It means someone that is going to do everything he can to take what is his, what he feels like belongs to him. And Jacob did that all his life. He took the right of the firstborn from Esau. Whenever he bought it for what Esau saw was a pot of porridge, Jacob saw as an opportunity. And he got it from him. And then when it came time to getting the blessing, Jacob dressed himself up as Esau so he could get the blessing from Isaac. Now, can I do an aside? Can I tell you this, right? You may not know this. Hold that for me. But Jacob went in believing that he had to do this in order to get the blessing that he felt belonged to him. Even though from the very time before they were born, God says, I'm going to choose the younger over the elder. But Jacob didn't believe that. He felt like he had to do it. But I want you to know that God changed Jacob's name from Jacob to Israel. When he changed his name is when he recognized that I am Jacob. I am a heel grabber. That is my nature. God says, well, that's not your nature anymore. I'm changing your name. Your name is no longer Jacob. Your name is his name Israel, because when God touched his hip, he no longer could push. He no longer could work. All he could do was grab and lean on God and trust God to make things happen to him. And here's what I wanted you to see at the end of his life. This is a topic for another day, a message for another day, but it's good stuff, and I want to share it with you. At the end of his life, he finally reconciles with Joseph, who had thought he had died. And Joseph has two kids, Ephraim and Manasseh. I believe Ephraim, I'm not sure which one is the oldest. I think Manasseh is the oldest, and Ephraim is the second oldest. But he brings them in, and Jacob says, Joseph, bring your sons over here because I want to bless them when I die. So Joseph has this mentality. He said, okay, the older one, he needs to get the better blessing, and the younger one gets the secondary blessing. And so he puts Manasseh on his right side, on Jacob's right side, because you bless with the right hand. That's where the greater blessing is God of my right hand. So Benjamin is the son of my right hand. He's the son of my strength, the son of my power. There's something about that in the Bible. So he puts Manasseh on Jacob's right side because Jacob's blind. He can't really see that well. And then he puts Ephraim on his left side because he assumes that Jacob's going to reach out his hands like this and he's going to bless them. But this is the same Jacob that tried to steal the blessing, remember? And what happened? See, Jacob couldn't believe for this, but this is what happens when he began to bless in the name of the Lord. He began to stretch his hands out, and he crossed his hands. It's almost like God said to him, Jacob, your natural tendency is to bless the older one. That's what I normally do, but I'm going to take control in this instance. You see, I've already told them that the younger is going to be blessed over the elder, and I'm going to do the same thing in Ephraim and Manasseh's life. And Jacob experienced what he could not experience before because he got his hands in the midst of it. And he crossed his hands. Why? Because God was working through Jacob, and Jacob had learned how to yield to what God was wanting to do in his life. Anyway, I got to get back. There are two extremes we often lean towards. One is all of me, none of God, and that was Jacob. The second one is this, all of God and none of me. If God's going to do it, he's going to do it. He's going to do it without me. God's sovereign. He can do whatever he wants. I think it was either Hudson or Carey, one of those that had a desire to go and do missions in the early, I'm going to guess the 1800s. He was in England and he wanted to do missions for the Lord. And they came to him, and at that particular time, it was the Reformed theology that was very prominent at the time, and it was all about the sovereignty of God. And they began to rebuke him. They said, if God wants to save the nations, he can do it on his own. He doesn't need you and I to help him. But I want you to know, that may sound right, but it's not biblical. It's not good theology, because God wants to save the nations, but he won't save the nations until he can find a man or a woman that's willing to yield to his will and accomplish what he wants to do in life. In actuality, the truth is God is wanting us, he's not wanting to do it without us. He's not wanting us to do it without him. He is wanting to co-labor with us. 1 Corinthians 3:9, for we are co-laborers together with God. In Matthew 11:29, he says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. So what's the importance of that? Well, you got to know what a yoke is. We don't really know what a yoke is. A yoke is something that you would use to put two cows together so they could work in tandem. Yeah, it could be oxen, it could be cows, it could be longhorn steers, but that wouldn't work too good because they got real long horns, they'll stab each other. So you put them together. For what? Because one can put 1,000 to flight, two can put 10,000 to flight. You can accomplish a lot more with two of them yoked together than one. He says, take my yoke upon you. Well, we're on one side of the yoke. Who's on the other? Jesus. We're supposed to work together. Right? This is God's desire for our life. It's been God's plan from the beginning of time that we work together with him to bring his will to pass on the earth, to bring his will to pass in your life, to bring his will to pass in your world, to bring his will to pass in your job, to bring his will to pass in your family, to bring his will to pass in you. getting back to our text. I'm going to continue on the same vein, but I want to bring out another truth because I want you to see this. Jesus asked the disciples, how many loaves do they have? And this is important because the truth is that we are required to bring something into the mix. And notice, when they said we have 5 loaves and 2 fishes, he didn't say, okay, well, give me 1 or 2 of them and you keep the rest. No, he took them all. And I want you to notice something about the scripture that I used while I was giving the teaching on offering time. When he talked about the woman that put in all that she had, he didn't go back and take one and say, here, take it. Why? Because it's going to require all that you have. In order to experience all that God has, it's going to require all that you have. Now listen, I'm not talking about that you can't get saved without putting work into it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about God has given all that he has, and we respond by giving all that we have. We love him, not with half our heart, not with 2/3 of our heart. We love him with all our heart. Why? Because we're responding to a God that loved us with all his heart. It's our response. He gave us all that he had, and we in turn give us all that we have. It's important because the truth is that we're required to bring something into the mix. Jesus did not touch and multiply nothing. He multiplied what the disciples brought to him. And the important principle is this, in this is called the principle of surrender. And the question is, will I surrender what I have and allow God to use it as he works through me, and what I surrender to him? If we were to go back and talk about giving, everybody wants God to bless them. God wants to be the one that's experiencing the barns overflowing and the vats overflowing. Everybody wants that. But in order to do that, we've got to be willing to surrender what we have. If we don't surrender what we have, we're not in the position to receive what he wants to give. It works that way. And it's the same thing. If we want to be able to experience God moving in our life, we've got to be willing to surrender what we have, whether it be finances, whether it be time, whether it be gifts, whether it be ability, whatever it is that we have, we've got to surrender it to God. When I first started preaching, every so often I talk about this, but it's impactful to me. I want it to be impactful to you. When I first started preaching, I did all I did what he asked me to do. Went to Bible college. I studied homiletics, hermeneutics, exegesis. I used to say exegesis. Exegesis is really exoing Jesus out of the process. No, it ain't. No, it ain't. I did all that. I'd read a passage and I felt like the Lord was in it. I'd do the hermeneutics, and then I'd do the homiletics. And, it'd take me 15, 20 hours to get a message ready, right? But I pretty much, every once in a while, once or twice I can remember, but maybe on one hand, all that time that I ever was not diligent to do what he asked me to do. I worked at it, because I always felt I love to be in the Word, but I always wanted to give the best that I had, right? Well, and one day, I'm giving all I got. And, I was only really preaching one time a week on Sunday mornings. I did do Bible studies on Wednesday night, and I did stuff on Sunday night. But usually what you do with that is you kind of get a series that you're doing. There are ways to get around that where you're not putting 15, 20 hours in every time you talk. But the reality is that could take place. But I remember crying out to God. I just kept saying, God, I have a desire. I want to spend more than just an hour or two with you. I want my life. I want to spend 3 hours with you a day. I want to spend 5 hours with you a day. It was my heart. I remember crying out to God. I want to do that, Lord. I want to be with you. I really do. That's all I want. And one day I go to a prophetic conference, and I really was not too much. I knew what the prophetic was. I'd experienced a little bit, but not like this. Not like what God began to do within my life. And I had a guy stand up, and he began to prophesy over Rick, you're a word man. And that's a good thing. You're a word man. But God wants to make you a spirit man too. You're going to be a word man, and you're going to be a spirit man. In fact, you're going to be a spirit man first. And where the spirit man and the word man, they begin to come together, that's where the power of God is. And he said, and all of a sudden something activated in my life. And that was on a Saturday. That was a Saturday conference. And Sunday morning, I used to come in early to get my thoughts together before everybody got there. I'd open up the building, turn the ACs on, and I'd just sit there for a few moments before people come in. And while I was sitting in the fellowship hall, all of a sudden, I had this thought. It never happened to me like that before. I had a thought. I went and got a piece of paper, started writing it down, as I told you before I began to preach that thought. And then what usually began to happen over a process of time is that, pretty much on Sunday mornings, I'd wake up at 4 a.m. and the Lord would give me a thought, and I'd write that thought out. And it wasn't coming, and I'd still spend every day hours in the Word and hours spending with God. So don't think that I became negligent when I was doing it. I wasn't having to study for a message. I just got to spend time with God. And out of the fruit of spending time with God, the messages would come. It's almost like God said, just spend time with me. I said this one time on Wednesday nights, and some of the guys went, huh? But anyway, I'm going to share it anyway. It's almost like, Rick, I just want you to spend time with me in a sense. I just want you to just dance with me. Dance with me. Don't worry about anything. Just dance with me. And I began to focus on him and just dance with him. It was like after the dance was over, I went and sat down, and there was a little piece of paper in my back pocket that he'd slipped in while I wasn't looking, and it was the message that he wanted me to preach. And it's been like that ever since. I have so much stuff to preach. I don't have enough time to preach it. But it's not because I'm looking for a message. It's because I'm looking for him. He'll give you the desires of your heart. But you got to be willing to give him your all. It works like that with me because I'm a preacher, but I don't know what you are. But maybe you're a musician, maybe you're an artist, maybe you're a teacher, maybe you're something. It works the same way. What is he wanting? What do you want? Give it to him. It's this principle of surrender. Will I surrender what I have and allow God to use it as he works through me and what I surrender to him? Am I willing to surrender my resources, my time, my abilities, my dreams? My plans. Abraham had to surrender his promise because his promise was in the form of a child by the name of Isaac that he had when he was 100 years old through his wife Sarah, who was 90 years old. And when he was weaned, and we're going to guess he's around 15 or 17 years old, God says, I want you to take your child, your only child, and go up to the mountain. I'm going to show you, and I want you to sacrifice him there on the mountain. He wasn't just sacrificing a child, he was sacrificing his promise. But God asked for it. And Abraham, what made Abraham the father of faith is not that Abraham wasn't confused. It's not that Abraham didn't know what was going on. It's that Abraham trusted God more than he did what he could see. He said, God said it. I don't know what's going to happen. I do know that I trust God. He made me a promise that I'm going to be the father of a multitude. And he said he was going to be through Isaac. So if I have to sacrifice Isaac, I'll do it. God must be able, it says in the book of Hebrews, God must be able to raise the dead because he's faithful. So if he's asking me for it, he's got something better. And think about, if I go back and talk about what I talked about before, think about Abraham and talking with Isaac and then talking with Jacob and Esau and all those people around. Think of him saying that one day, being able to go to his kids and say, and God asked me to go sacrifice my son right here. And I took him up on the mountain, and Isaac's going, yep, you sure did. Yeah. And I put the wood on his shoulder, and Isaac said, yep, you sure did. You took me up on there. And I got up there, and I didn't have to struggle to tie him up because Isaac just let me tie him up. And Isaac's going, yes, that sure happened. And I was about to do this, and I heard an angel talk to me, and Isaac said, yep, I heard him too. Stop! And we looked over, and I'm telling you, I've been hunting all my life. I'm adding to the story, I know. But I've been hunting all my life, and there's never been a deer on that mountain. But I looked over there, and all of a sudden, there was a ram with his horns stuck in the trees over there. And God said, now you go sacrifice that in place of your son. And Isaac can tell his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, how God was faithful. Because he was willing to surrender whatever it is that God had for him. Will I surrender my dreams? Will I surrender my plans? He works with what we bring and surrender to him. Moses, God said to Moses, what's that in your hand? Of course, we knew it was a staff. To the widow woman in 2 Kings chapter 4, what do you have in your house? Nothing except for a little bit of oil. How about the disciples? How many loaves do you have? I want to add one more thing to the mix. He multiplies what you bring him. Now, this is going to sound strange to you, but it'll really help you to understand what I'm talking about here. What did they bring to Jesus? Loaves and fishes. What did everybody eat that day? Loaves and fishes, right? What if they would have brought him tacos? Would he say, nah, can't use that, got to have loaves and fishes? No. What would everybody have eaten that day? Tacos. What if they'd have brought him filet mignon? What would everybody have eaten that day? What if they'd have brought him hamburgers? What would everybody have eaten that day? Hamburgers. What if they'd have brought him, pho, chicken pho? What would everybody have eaten that day? Chicken pho. You understand what I'm saying? He multiplies what you bring him. In the same way, he will work through you and who you are when you bring yourself to him. God will multiply what you bring him. If you give him you, what he multiplies will have the essence of you. We keep saying, God, all of you, none of me. And God said, no, I had that one time. That's why I created you. I don't like that. That's why I created Adam. I didn't want to do it without Adam. I wanted to do it with Adam. I like what somebody said. Did you know that the temple that God dwelt in the Old Testament that they built for him was never God's idea? It was David's idea. But this is what was awesome. David was God's idea. Did you know that you're God's idea? You. And when you bring yourself to him, he's not going to make you into a Benny Hinn. He's not going to make you into a Jimmy Swaggart. He's not going to make you into a Rick Hilgaro. God forbid anybody would be another one of me. He's not going to make you into Carol. He's not going to make you into somebody else. He's going to make you into the best essence of you that you can be. Too often we want others and even ourselves to be cookie-cutter versions of someone else. What we fail to realize is that God is not interested in uniformity. He's interested in you. God takes the natural, touches it, and through it flows the supernatural. God takes us, whatever we bring to him, touches us, whatever we bring to him. And if we'll surrender to him, flows through us supernaturally to meet the needs of those and to meet the needs that we bring to him and of those around them that we bring to him. Now, it's not the way we might draw things up, but it's the way he draws things up. And his ways are infinitely